Hello, and thank you for allowing us some time to discuss Team Gray's study on corporate gamification. Team Gray consists of online classmates Nicole, John, aka Graydon, and myself, Steve. We have been working together this semester on a topic of gamification in corporate settings. The term gamification was first used in 1960s with the development of social and private board games. This term was used to define the application of typical elements to games such as point scoring, competition with others, and rules for play. In 2008, the word gamification first made its appearance in the context of computer software. Its widespread use in 2010 focused more on digital games and marketing. Gamification became a natural muse as online applications and products were being developed, offering motivational experience to areas of education, sports and fitness, corporations, and even online shopping. There are differing points of views to gamification and its intent to leverage the natural desires of people through competition, learning, achievement, status, self-expression, and socialization. The strategies of gamification offer rewards for those who accomplish a task before others who are engaged in the same activity. Rewards can take the likeness of points, badges, levels, or filling a progress meter. Some even offer a chance to collect virtual currency to be spent on the game in a future gameplay. The term gamification has also been used in the fields of artificial intelligence, data science, and natural language processing as features of corporate software without distinct definition of utility. Research is ongoing on how gamification is approached and the benefits to the user as they work with, through, or alongside the competition of their cohorts. Some research indicates that motivations drop when badges are introduced in different platforms of social interaction. But it is a great motivator to students who are learning through online gamification, opportunities, and applications. In this study, we seek to explore the impact of gamification to employee engagement. We offered a convenient survey to 160 full-time employees within an organization where there were 72 females and 88 males. The dependent variable of this study is focused on employment engagement levels, as determined by surveys conducted pre- and post-engagement. For this study, employee engagement was measured with a set of workplace-specific engagement items in a survey consistent with industry standards. To determine how the workplace is affected, an implementation of an official peer-to-peer recognition policy is supported by a gamification element. This survey consisted of 15 questions of involvement. Results were calculated using a 6-point agreement Likert scale. The timeline for this study was then set up in a 3-phase process, with a pre-survey and introduction to the new recognition hashtag on Slack. Slack is self-defined as a platform that connects teams with apps, services, and resources they need to get the work done. Slack's primary utility for this is team collaboration, communication, and community building. We split this work study into 2 parts. Control, which gave us a baseline measurement of organizations' engagement levels, an experimental period used to measure the effect of gamification implementation. Since the users were already familiar with Slack's functions, we incorporated a peer-to-peer recognition through a special Slack channel, #recognition. Employees who were inclined to recognize a peer would post a message on this channel with a brief description, optional graphics, and a mention of the individual being recognized. This resulted in a timeline view of interactions among employees, showcasing their appreciation for one another. A second survey was conducted after a 6-month period to collect feedback. Then, a second phase of the study implemented a launching of a new recognition platform with badge element in place. Utilizing the same Slack channel, employees were given badges of recognition as they were commended by their peers. After this 6-month involvement, the workplace population was once again to fill out the standard survey to assess any change. In this study, we seek to answer the question, does user engagement and performance increase with the presence of gamification elements? We are starting this research with the hypothesis that gamification has a negative impact over all employee engagement. For more on our hypothesis and our findings, I shall turn the microphone over to Nicole.
The main purpose of this within-subject study was to determine whether the implementation of gamification features within an employee recognition platform affected employee engagement. Our hypothesis, H1, states that gamification in a corporate setting has an impact on employee engagement. Thus, and as discussed, our dependent variable is employee engagement, measured via fully structured employee engagement surveys at critical points in our study. Our independent variable is the gamification element in the form of badges and is introduced into a corporate employee recognition program. The participants in our study, sampled via convenience, represented the population of the organization. The group was comprised of 160 total participants, 72 women and 88 men. The mean age was 31 years old and the age range was 20 to 45. To examine our hypothesis, we conducted a two-phase study that assessed employee engagement at 3 important points. At the start of the experiment, T sub 0, upon conclusion of a control period and before the introduction of the gamification feature, T sub 1, and upon conclusion of the experimental period, T sub 2. Consistent with industry standards measuring employee engagement, our surveys utilized a Likert scale point system ranging from 1 to 6, strongly disagree to strongly agree. The dependent variable was derived from the means of 15 6-point Likert scale items and assessed via 3 fully structured employee engagement surveys assessed at each of the 3 points in time discussed previously. Ratings can vary from population to population, but it's not atypical to see a small number of 6s. A score of 6, i.e. highly engaged, requires a participant to report strongly agree on at least 8 and agree on at least 7 questions. Depending on the organization, this may not be feasible, as is the case with our data set, which was derived from an actual unidentified organization. Our independent variable, the gamification element, is implied by its binary on-off state and was introduced upon conclusion of the control time frame and upon commencement of the experimental time frame. The data in the table shown provides a baseline understanding of the levels of employee engagement at each of the time frames in our study. Note that because the employee engagement score is an average of the 15 6-point questions, the highest ranking engagement level washed out of the data for this study. An ANOVA repeated measures analysis regarding overall employee engagement showed that there was a statistically significant difference in overall employee engagement scores within the 3 surveys. While this test cannot ascertain where any significance lies, it is less prone to type 1 errors and was used to eliminate that possibility. The primary focus of the study was to assess the impact of the gamification element on employee engagement. However, to ensure accurate interpretation of the data, we analyzed the impact of the recognition program as well as the gamification element itself on employee engagement. Paired samples t-tests were run to assess the effects at times T sub 0, T sub 1, and T sub 2 in the combinations presented here. A paired samples t-test was run to assess the impact of employee recognition program on employee engagement. Results showed that there was not a statistically significant difference between the control engagement scores and the engagement scores assessed upon conclusion of T sub 1. A paired samples t-test was run to assess the effect of the gamification feature on employee engagement scores within the corporate employee recognition program. Results showed that there was a statistically significant difference between the pre-gamification engagement and the employee engagement upon conclusion of the gamification timeframe. A paired samples t-test was run to assess the overall effect of the employee recognition program, including the badge gamification feature on employee engagement. Results showed that there was a statistically significant difference between the pre-test engagement and the final engagement study. This plot demonstrates the drops in employee engagement as identified in the aforementioned t-test. As expected, the plot demonstrates a minor drop in engagement between T sub 0 and T sub 1 and a statistically significant drop in engagement between T sub 1 and T sub 2, and of course between T sub 0 and T sub 2. In addition to the discoveries noted above, we identified and explored the differences in employee engagement based on participant demographics, including age and gender. With respect to age, while our analysis reveals some variation among age groups, the measures across every age group in the organization remain consistent. Worth noting, however, the overall mean engagement across all three surveys for employees aged 35 to 39 was highest, and ages 40 to 44 was the lowest. All employees displayed a decrease in overall engagement as the experiment progressed, especially as the gamification element was introduced. However, men indicated the most dramatic drop in overall engagement across all three measures. Okay, now I'll turn it over to John, who will go over the discussion and the conclusion of our research. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Nicole. The purpose of the study was to examine the effect gamification elements, in this case badges, have on employee engagement when implemented with an official recognition program. The results of the paired test analyses in the previous slides indicate statistically significant results with a great enough degree in support of our primary hypothesis, indicating that the gamification element has a negative impact on employee engagement. Since the relevant differences were observed only once the gamification badges were introduced, we were able to rule out the recognition program as the cause of the drop in engagement. Previous research suggests that gamification has a positive impact on user engagement in a software system setting. An example of such evidence is discussed in Homari's Do Badges Increase User Activity?, a field experiment on the effects of gamification. This publication reports the results of a 2-year field experiment in which the authors seek to determine whether the use of gamification features increases user engagement in a non-gaming context. During this 2-year experiment, the authors tracked the actions of users within a live software system, ShareTribe, for a calendar year before and a calendar year after the introduction of badges. The result of the study indicated that there is a positive correlation between gamification and increased user engagement. In contrast, pre-research also denounces the benefits of gamification. An example is the Kayuski et al. Experimental field study, To Gamify or Not to Gamify, an experimental field study of the influence of badges on motivation, activity, and performance in an online learning course. In recognizing the importance of student engagement in a learning environment, the authors conducted a 16-week field study to determine whether the use of gamification elements such as badges had an impact on student motivation. The authors found no significant evidence that supported the hypothesis that the badge system would increase student motivation. This is an important area of study because previous research has called into question the efficacy of gamification efforts. Such efforts have been accused of actually undermining intrinsic motivation and may have unintended consequences. By limiting our study on a single aspect of gamification, badges, we are attempting to isolate the effects of one particular gamification element. Furthermore, this is the first study of its kind that attempts to correlate the effects of gamification on employee engagement, which is a metric more closely tied to job satisfaction. This study does have some limitations to consider. First of all, sampling was performed via convenience, as all participants were a part of the organization available at the time of this study. Future studies may benefit from random sampling and the assignment of participants to subgroups that align with each of the timeframes studied herein. Experiments performed with each group will run concurrently and span the total time of the study. For example, and as illustrated here, Group 1 may be assigned to the Barebones Slack user group, Group 2 to the Slack Employee Recognition System only, and Group 3 to the Slack Recognition System plus badge-based gamification. Further exploration is also necessary to discover the cause of change in engagement between genders. While we found our results to be intriguing, we didn't have the data necessary to deduce the reason for the more drastic drop in overall engagement among males. In conclusion, it has been argued that gamification in a corporate setting may increase employee engagement. We collected and analyzed data from employee engagement surveys to determine the impact that gamification has on employee engagement. Our study is unique in that it merges the research sensibilities of HCI industry best practices with that of HR industry best practices to examine the contraindication of employee engagement and gamification elements. Based on the results of our study, the general conclusion is that the implementation of gamification features in the format of badges within an official corporate employee recognition platform has a negative influence on employee engagement. The significance of our findings suggests that future study is worthwhile. Suggested areas to consider include the types of badges and level-up systems that are offered, badges with corporate endorsement and recognition such as pay, day off, and more. Furthermore, use of gamification in a non-mandatory or unofficial setting may be an intriguing avenue of inquiry. Thank you for your time. On behalf of Team Gray, we hope you enjoyed our presentation.